Welcome to Ancient Mysteries. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and in today's episode, we explore a side of the ancient world that challenges modern assumptions. An enigmatic realm of plants, potions, and altered states of consciousness. From hidden temples to sacred mountains, ancient cultures across the globe turned to nature's most potent substances not for escape, but for revelation. Were they simply experimenting with chemistry, or were they unlocking doors to something we've forgotten? Thousands of years ago, in the dense rainforests of the Amazon and the highlands of Central Asia, people were discovering something extraordinary, that certain plants, when prepared in precise ways, could produce experiences that defied logic, shattered ordinary perception, and, according to those who underwent them, revealed a deeper truth. These weren't accidental discoveries. Across continents and cultures, ancient civilizations seemed to possess an astonishing understanding of nature's most potent pharmacological tools. In the Amazon, tribes brewed ayahuasca, a dark, bitter liquid made from two plants that, when combined, create one of the most powerful psychedelic experiences known to humanity. The science behind this brew is intricate. One plant contains DMT, a compound naturally occurring in many organisms, including the human body. The other plant inhibits the enzymes that would normally break DMT down in the stomach, allowing the visionary compound to take hold and persist for hours. Without modern chemistry, how did they figure this out? That question has baffled ethnobotanists for decades. Further north, in the American Southwest and northern Mexico, indigenous groups such as the Huichol and the Tarahumara have for centuries used the peyote cactus in ceremonial rituals. The cactus contains mescaline, a psychoactive alkaloid that produces powerful visual and emotional experiences. To the untrained eye, peyote is a spiny, unremarkable plant, but to these cultures it is a sacred being, known as hikuri, a deity in plant form. Consuming it is not taken lightly. It is done with intention, prayer, and song. The goal is not entertainment, but connection, to ancestors, to spirit guides, to the very fabric of life. Meanwhile, in the highlands of South America, the San Pedro cactus has played a similar role. Archaeological evidence from sites like Chavin de Huantar, a ceremonial center in Peru dating back over 3,000 years, reveals iconography of fanged beings and serpentine figures believed to be visions seen during trance states induced by San Pedro. Researchers have found cactus remains at the site, confirming that it played a role in ritual life. The people who worshipped there believed the cactus could open the mind to the gods, allow communication with the spirit world, and bring healing not only to the body, but to the soul. In ancient India, the Rig Veda, one of the oldest known religious texts, sings the praises of soma, a mysterious plant-based elixir that was said to grant divine insight and immortality. The actual identity of soma has been lost to time, but scholars have speculated that it could have been a psychoactive mushroom, cannabis, or even a now extinct plant. What is clear is that the Vedic priests held it in the highest esteem. They consumed it during complex fire rituals, chanting hymns to the heavens, seeking union with cosmic forces far beyond human understanding. These early civilizations did not separate medicine from magic, nor chemistry from spirituality. For them, these substances weren't just tools, they were teachers. They were living beings, each with its own spirit, its own lesson, its own price. To consume them was to step into a realm where the ordinary laws of reality dissolved, and where truths were revealed that could change the way one saw the world forever. One of the most enigmatic and enduring examples of ancient psychoactive ritual lies in the secretive rites of Eleusis, a small town in ancient Greece. For nearly 2,000 years, initiates from all corners of the Greek world made pilgrimages to participate in the Eleusinian Mysteries, a highly guarded religious ceremony honouring the goddess Demeter and her daughter Persephone. At the heart of this ceremony was a ritual drink called kykeon. Its precise ingredients were never recorded in detail, but clues scattered through ancient texts suggest it was more than a simple barley brew. Modern researchers and classicists have proposed that kion may have been a psychoactive mixture, possibly containing ergot, a fungus that grows on barley and contains alkaloids chemically similar to LSD. This hypothesis has gained traction due to the intensely spiritual and often transformative experiences reported by ancient participants. Initiates included some of history's greatest thinkers, Plato, Pindar, Cicero, each of whom described the Eleusinian experience as life-altering, a vision of life and death so profound it erased the fear of mortality. But these visions were not shared openly. Participants were bound by an oath of secrecy so strong that breaking it was punishable by death. No explicit records survive of what took place within the inner sanctum, but what is known is this: the rituals involved fasting, purification, a long procession to the sanctuary, and finally the drinking of kikeon in total darkness. Then came the revelation, something so powerful, so ineffable, that even the most skeptical were left in awe. Whatever the experience was, it unified thousands of years of spiritual seekers in reverence for a divine mystery. In a different corner of the world, the same sacred relationship with psychoactive substances was taking place, this time in Mesoamerica. The Aztecs and their predecessors, including the Olmec and the Maya, revered a family of psychoactive mushrooms known as teonanacatl, or flesh of the gods. These mushrooms, rich in psilocybin, were used in rituals that often coincided with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, eclipses. The ceremonies were led by priest-shamans who guided participants through hallucinogenic journeys intended to communicate with deities, foretell the future, or resolve spiritual illness. Archaeological evidence supports these traditions. Mushroom stones have been uncovered in Guatemala and southern Mexico, stylized with carved caps and anthropomorphic features. Spanish missionaries recorded these rituals with horror, describing frenzied dances, weeping, laughter and prostration before gods whose images seemed to emerge from the darkness. In their efforts to suppress indigenous religions, the missionaries outlawed the use of these mushrooms, forcing the ceremonies underground, where they would remain, hidden but unforgotten for centuries. Meanwhile, in Siberia, nomadic tribes developed rituals around the Amanita muscaria mushroom, the iconic red-capped fungus with white spots. Consuming it raw could be toxic, but shamans discovered that after ingestion, the psychoactive compounds remained intact in urine. Thus, it became a common and accepted practice to drink the urine of a shaman who had already ingested the mushroom, gaining the visionary effects without the toxic side effects. These trance states were used for divination, healing, and communicating with the spirit realm, part of a complex cosmology in which the shaman served as a bridge between the earthly and the divine. These cultures, separated by continents and without contact, each developed sophisticated systems of knowledge around psychoactive substances. Their rituals were not accidents. They were blueprints refined over generations. And within each ceremony, we glimpse the same question burning through the veil of time: what lies beyond the limits of perception? And what happens when we dare to look? In the modern world, where clinical trials and controlled experiments define our understanding of reality, the ancient use of mind-altering substances often seems shrouded in mysticism, even absurdity. But the more we uncover about ancient drug use, the more difficult it becomes to dismiss these practices as primitive. On the contrary, they reveal a deeply nuanced view of the human mind, one that understood, perhaps better than we do today, that consciousness was not a fixed state, but a doorway. And the keys to that doorway were found in the roots, leaves, seeds, and fungi of the earth. This understanding was not confined to ritual. In many ancient traditions, psychoactive substances were part of a broader medical and spiritual framework. In ancient China, for example, texts like the Shenong Benkao Jing, compiled over 2,000 years ago, document the use of hundreds of plants, including cannabis and datura, for treating both physical ailments and mental disturbances. Taoist monks were known to use herbal concoctions that induced altered states during meditation, believing that such states allowed the practitioner to commune with immortals or harmonize with cosmic forces. Similarly, in the Indian subcontinent, the roots of Ayurvedic medicine intertwined with spiritual practice. Certain herbs were administered not just to relieve suffering, but to elevate the spirit, to purify karma, or to prepare the mind for insight. In this context, plants were not seen as isolated compounds. They were beings with personalities, aligned with elemental forces, and capable of awakening different aspects of the self. And this brings us to a fundamental difference in worldview. Modern pharmacology tends to isolate compounds, separating the chemical from the cultural. Ancient traditions did the opposite. They embedded these substances in story, in ritual, in cosmology. They didn't just ask what a plant did, they asked who the plant was. What was its spirit? What songs did it like? What offerings should be made before consuming it? Among the Shipibo people of the Amazon, ayahuasca ceremonies begin not with ingestion, but with preparation. Songs passed down for generations, dietary restrictions, days of solitude. These are not superstitions. They are part of a complex system designed to focus intention and protect the participant. In that context, the substance does not act alone. It responds to the framework built around it. Even the methods of consumption carried symbolic weight. Smoking, drinking, chewing, each had its place, its meaning, and its risks. Some cultures believed that smoke carried prayers upward to the gods. Others thought that liquids entered the soul more directly. In Mesoamerica, ritual enemas using psychoactive infusions were performed to purify and transport the spirit, a practice that, though shocking to modern sensibilities, was done with great care and respect. All of these traditions point to one idea, that the mind is a landscape, and certain plants are maps. In the hands of the uninitiated, they might lead nowhere, or into danger. But in the hands of those trained in ritual and intention, they led to places few dared to go. This was not recreational use, it was revelation. And though the specifics varied from culture to culture, the core insight remained astonishingly consistent, that there exists within us, and perhaps all around us, a hidden reality. And sometimes to see it, we must first learn how to look with different eyes. In revisiting these ancient traditions, we're not just exploring the history of medicine or the roots of religious experience. We're stepping into a world where the line between the natural and the supernatural is fluid, where plants are not inert materials, but sacred agents, and where consciousness itself is a frontier to be explored with reverence. And at the heart of it all is a profound idea, that altered states of awareness are not aberrations or accidents, but intentional, necessary stages in the human search for meaning. In many of these traditions, the use of psychoactive substances was reserved for specific moments, rites of passage, communal ceremonies, periods of crisis, or moments of renewal. They weren't taken casually or frequently. They were used with purpose, often under the supervision of a guide or spiritual leader. In this way, the substance became a threshold, and the ritual became a kind of map, one that guided individuals through the unknown territories of the self and beyond. There's something deeply symbolic in the plants chosen for these rituals. Many grow in remote, difficult-to-reach places, on mountaintops, in dense forests, in deserts. Their scarcity and danger mirrored the inner journey they catalyzed. Difficult, disorienting, but potentially transformative. In this, we see a kind of universal metaphor, one where the path to insight is rarely easy, and where the reward is not guaranteed but must be earned through discipline, humility, and openness. Some researchers argue that these rituals served a larger social function as well. In societies without written laws or psychological counseling, these ceremonies provided a framework for emotional catharsis, ethical reflection, and spiritual renewal. A troubled individual might return from a vision quest with new clarity, new purpose, or even a new role in the community. The experience of ego dissolution, so common in psychedelic states, may have helped people break free of destructive patterns, resolve inner conflicts, or connect more deeply with others. In this way, the use of ancient drugs wasn't just about accessing higher realms, it was about restoring balance. And then there's the question of what exactly people were experiencing. Were the gods they encountered figments of the imagination, or something else? Were the voices and visions symbolic expressions of the subconscious, or were they actual communications from other realms? For ancient people, the answer was clear. These experiences were real. Not in the way we define empirical reality today, but in a deeper, more personal sense. The knowledge gained in these states was sacred, transformative, and often considered more truthful than anything seen with open eyes. This speaks to a broader understanding of reality itself, one where the physical world is only one layer among many, and where substances that alter perception don't distort the truth. They reveal it. They peel back the ordinary, and in doing so, invite the participant to see with new eyes. That invitation, to expand perception, to question what is real, to seek communion with something greater, lies at the very heart of humanity's oldest mysteries. And as we continue to decode the artifacts and traditions left behind, we're not just uncovering forgotten rituals, we're rediscovering a map, one that even now might still have something to show us. What makes these ancient practices all the more compelling is how they challenge the assumptions of the modern world. In an age dominated by science, rationalism, and digital abstraction, the idea that ancient people might have accessed wisdom, real transformative wisdom, through a communion with plants can seem naive or unscientific. But that very assumption may be what blinds us to the deeper truths they discovered. We tend to divide reality into categories: mind and body, science and spirituality, the real and the imaginary. Ancient traditions, particularly those rooted in the use of psychoactive substances, saw no such hard lines. The visions experienced in trance weren't hallucinations, they were encounters. The spirits seen weren't dismissed, they were revered. Healing wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, emotional, and cosmic. And the substances used weren't drugs in the modern sense, they were bridges between worlds. This worldview doesn't align neatly with modern pharmacology, but as contemporary science begins to revisit psychedelic compounds, psilocybin, DMT, mescaline, and others, the parallels with ancient practices are impossible to ignore. Modern clinical studies are now confirming what many ancient cultures may have intuitively understood, that these substances can reduce fear of death, alleviate trauma, dissolve ego fixation, and catalyze a deep sense of unity with nature, others, and the self. These revelations are forcing researchers to reconsider the role of these substances in the history of human consciousness. Could the early use of psychoactives have played a role in the formation of religion, of language, of civilization itself? Some scholars have proposed exactly that. The so-called stoned ape theory suggests that early humans encountering psychoactive mushrooms in the wild may have experienced bursts of creativity, empathy, and cognition that helped shape the very fabric of human culture. That theory remains controversial, but its popularity reflects a growing interest in the idea that ancient drug use wasn't just a curiosity, it was a catalyst, a spark, a key that unlocked something fundamental in the human psyche, and perhaps it still can. Yet this journey isn't without its dangers. The ancient world also recognized that these substances held power, and that power came with risk. Visions could heal, but they could also break. Insights could enlighten, but they could also overwhelm. That's why so many of these traditions included not only the substance, but the ritual, the guide, the structure. Without these, the journey could become disorienting, even destructive. With them, it became sacred. It's this balance between chaos and order, vision and discipline, that defined the ancient use of mind-altering plants, and it's what separates a sacred rite from an experiment. As we stand on the edge of a new psychedelic renaissance, that lesson may be more important than ever, because these plants, these fungi, these sacred brews, they are not new. They are old as language, as old as belief, and their mysteries are not forgotten. They've simply been waiting for us to remember how to listen again. When we pull back and examine the arc of this story, not just the history, but the meaning that pulses beneath it, we find ourselves staring into something far larger than chemistry or anthropology. We begin to see that the ancient use of mind-altering substances was not about escapism, but revelation. Not about novelty, but initiation. These plants were not only pharmacological tools, they were symbolic languages, woven into the very structure of myth, ritual, and the sacred. In nearly every culture where these substances were used, there is a striking reverence not just for the effects they produce, but for the experience they represent. Altered states weren't distractions from reality. They were deeper realities. Realities often described as more true than waking life. From the dream time of the Aboriginal Australians to the astral realms of ancient Egyptian initiates, the idea recurs. There is another world beneath this one. And certain plants, taken in the right way with the right intention, can show the way. This idea changes how we think about healing. In many indigenous traditions, illness was never seen as purely physical. It was spiritual misalignment. something out of balance between the individual and the world. The shaman or healer would use psychoactive plants to journey inward, not only to discover the source of illness, but to negotiate with it. Sometimes that meant speaking to ancestral spirits. Sometimes it meant facing one's own fears or guilt. These were not metaphors, they were enacted realities. The symbolism is powerful. To be healed, one must see, not just what's broken, but what lies beneath the breaking. And it was the visionary plant that opened the eyes, not just of the body, but of the soul. There's also something profoundly egalitarian about these practices. While priests and shamans held specialized knowledge, many traditions saw these experiences as part of communal life. Vision quests, rites of passage, seasonal ceremonies, these were times when ordinary individuals stepped into the extraordinary, not as passive spectators but as active participants in the mystery of existence. Even the plants themselves were integrated into mythologies as characters, teachers, tricksters, gods. Peyote was the little deer among the Huichol. Ayahuasca was the vine of the soul. Psilocybin mushrooms were flesh of the gods. These weren't mere descriptions, they were acknowledgements of relationship. A recognition that to take something into the body was also to form a bond with it, a spiritual contract. These relationships, these ceremonies, these visions, they were how ancient people explored the boundaries of death, rebirth, purpose, and identity. They were a kind of education, not just about the world, but about what it means to be in the world, to be conscious, to be connected, to be alive in a universe that is not inert and silent, but breathing, listening, speaking. And so, in the hushed chambers of old temples, beneath the canopy of ancient forests, by firelight and under stars, the ancients drank, chewed, inhaled, and ingested. And what they found was not madness or illusion, but meaning. The kind that changes a life, the kind that doesn't fade. As we close this journey through the ancient use of sacred substances, what emerges is not just a historical account, it's a mirror. A reflection of who we were, and perhaps who we still are, beneath the layers of modernity. These weren't just stories of shamans and rituals, mushrooms and vines. They were stories of humans reaching beyond their limitations, beyond their fears, beyond the veil of the ordinary, in search of something eternal. We've travelled across continents and cultures, through the rainforests of the Amazon, the high temples of the Andes, the stone sanctuaries of ancient Greece, the deserts of Mesoamerica, and the icy plains of Siberia. In each place we found the same thread, a reverence for nature's power to transform consciousness. Not as a side note, but as a cornerstone of spiritual life. What makes this even more remarkable is how these traditions developed independently, often separated by vast distances, yet sharing so many of the same principles. The preparation, the ceremony, the symbolism, the intention. The understanding that altered states must be respected, that what is seen there beyond the senses is not to be taken lightly. We've looked at the theories, the evidence, the debates. We've heard from scholars who argue these practices shaped language, religion, and culture. And we've seen how modern science is slowly rediscovering what many of our ancestors already seemed to know, that these substances can offer not just insight, but healing, that they can reopen pathways in the mind, perhaps even the soul, that have long been closed. But the mystery remains. Because at its heart, this is not a story that can be measured in data alone. It is experiential, personal, intimate. It lives in visions, in silence, in the space between breath and memory. It is the kind of mystery that defies definition because it was never meant to be explained, only encountered. And so, we're left with questions. Did these ancient rites truly connect people to higher realms, or did they simply open new dimensions within themselves? Were the gods they spoke to real? Or were they mirrors of the human soul, reflected back in symbolic language? Were these rituals glimpses of universal truth, or beautiful illusions born of chemistry and myth? Perhaps the answer is both, or neither. Perhaps the point was never to know, but to feel, to sit with the mystery rather than try to solve it. Because that's what the ancients did. They sat under stars with smoke curling into the night, and they asked the big questions, not with arrogance, but with awe. Who are we? Why are we here? What lies beyond this life? And the plants, the fungi, the sacred brews, they answered, in visions, in whispers, in images too vast for words. And maybe that's why these practices endured for millennia, because they didn't just reveal the unseen, they reminded us that we are part of something greater, something ancient, something still alive. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and this has been another episode of Ancient Mysteries. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you would like to support the show, subscribe to Ancient Mysteries on Spotify. The link is in the description. Subscribe now.